Hey everybody, it's Brandy Clark with another episode of You Can't Come Over, But You Can Come In. I know everybody out there is as excited as me about today's guest, Mary Chapin Carpenter. When I announced this, people lost their minds. Like,
no, they did not.
They did. In fact, and before I could announce it, I've got a couple friends. I've got more than a couple friends that are big fans of yours, but I've got a couple that probably are on your list of, okay, be careful of that person. They might shock you. And I was like, you are never going to guess who's going to come on this. And they're like, who? And I was like, Mary Chapin Carpenter. And it was, how'd you do that? So thank you for joining me today.
It's an honor and it's a pleasure. I'm right back at you. The last time we saw one another, and I think the first time we met was in a holding room in an old theater in London, at the very end of January at the UK Americana Awards, and that was the last time and the first time that we've been in the same room together, I think.
It was, except you wouldn't remember me from this, but I think it was very brief. We probably didn't even meet, but one of my part-time jobs in college was I was Mary Ann McCrady's assistant.
No, you were not.
Part of the time.
No, you weren't.
I was, because she had, and Mary, for those of you that don't know, Mary Ann McCrady is a business manager, and Mary Chapin was a client. I'm assuming you probably still are.
Yes. In fact, if I can just say this, because Mary Ann tells me this, reminds me of this all the time. I was their very first client.
Were you really?
I was.
Oh.
Company. So so we go back quite a ways.
Yes, and I remember you guys as being friends. It's more than just together.
I love her dearly. So did you and I interact? And I just obviously don't remember.
Probably not beyond me answering the phone saying Mary Ann McCrady's office. And I was not a very good assistant. Like, it was a part-time. It was an internship / job.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember you being in there. I probably got Nashville for you guys or something.
On Hayes Street?
Yes.
Yeah,
back on Hayes Street.
I remember that building. Yeah.
It was such a good teaching ground for me. And there were so many people in and out of there. And Don Schlitz's office was...
That's right downstairs. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really tell a lot of people that I was, a singer-songwriter, because I didn't want... That was kind of frowned upon. I do remember telling Mary Ann and her helping me out a little bit. And she was a great boss, actually.
That's so good to hear. I'm glad to hear.
But yeah, I do remember.
I love her very much. I'm sorry, say that again.
I do feel like you might have been in the office once when I was there, but if it was just
fleeting.
Yeah, just fleeting.
I really didn't, because I never lived in Nashville in any official capacity. I always was pretty fleeting. I would go in and say hello to whoever I needed to meet up with, and then disappear. I'm a phantom in that way.
See, I think there's a real positive to that. I'm glad you brought that up. That wasn't even one of the things I was going to ask you, but I look at like you and Lori McKenna, who I work with quite a bit. I think that you guys have a really great vantage point in that you don't live in Nashville and you're not immersed in, as much as I love the songwriting community, you're not immersed in it. So it always stays really special to you. I feel like.
Well, I think that's an interesting way to look at it, but I always sort of look at it on the other, I turn that around a bit. When I come to Nashville, when I get to experience the community that is there, as part of an event, or someone having a guitar pull, or just getting together, it's been a long time, but when I would occasionally write with someone or something like that, when I would come away from those experiences, I would feel just totally filled up and happy, and felt like I had a community that I was a part of, and I really longed for that, and I still do at times. I think at a certain point we're used to what we're used to, and that's just the way we are. But I have such affection and love and respect for the community of songwriters and artists in Nashville, that when I am invited to some event, or as a part of something, it just fills my tank. It's just the most wonderful feeling. So I suppose there's just so many different ways to turn it around and look at it.
Yeah, I think, and I don't like, I always feel it's special and I don't take it for granted. But part of that is having been around like Lori and now hearing you say that, where it's like when Lori comes to Nashville, it's almost like a vacation to her. Like she gets to
Oh,
come.
that's right. Yeah.
She's alone writing in Boston, and then she comes down and she gets to co-write, and and when you're in that everyday grind of it, which I haven't been in the super everyday grind of it since I started making records, but you can start, starts to feel a little more like a job.
Right. And I mean, I would think she is so, revered and respected and has been so embraced, if you will, and rightly so, for all the success she's had as a songwriter. I would think that she would maybe divide her, like, does she have a home in Nashville? And like, does she come and stay in a hotel every time she comes, or?
I think she just got a condo. I think she would
Okay.
she'd say to other people. She would love that we're talking about her right now. I'm gonna have I mean, Lori McKenna was a huge part of this this session. Yeah, she does. I think she just got a condo, but I've always been a little bit. And my record deal is in LA, and so I feel similar about LA that you guys probably feel to Nashville, because when I come out here, it's like, oh, or maybe it's just that I feel a little more special because I'm not around as much,
I think that that's a real thing. I think that's absolutely a real thing. I do love the feeling, though, of, I think of it as sort of being nimble. I like the idea that you can sort of parachute in someplace. You have friends there. You know your way around. You can get in a car and you know where you're going when you're driving. A place like that for me is Nashville. And that I always know there's someone I can call, hang out with, to be with, to work with, whatever. And then I can sort of, like I said, I can sort of be a phantom. I can sneak home and sneak away and just go do my thing or whatever. And so I like that feeling of being nimble.
I love that. Speaking of driving around, I have to tell you, there's an album of yours I was not aware of, Songs from the Movies. And
songs from the movie. That's what it is. Yeah.
And Robert Philhart, who's one of those friends who was like, what, you got Mary Chapin to do this? He said, have you listened to that album? And I said, no, I haven't. And he's like, you need to go get it. So I got it, and I'm in LA, in a really beautiful part of LA out by the canyons. And so the other day I had to run an errand, and I thought, I'm going to listen to that album. And I found myself like weeping it was just, the arrangements are beautiful, and I was driving through all this beautiful scenery, and it just felt like this is, was where I was supposed to be when I heard that. But how did that come about?
Well, I first of all, I'm so glad you discovered the record. It started out many, many years ago. I was years and years and years ago, Don Henley put together a bunch of benefits to raise money for the preservation of Walden Pond in Massachusetts. And so he put together a series of concerts where he invited all these different women from all different genres of music, pop music, country music, folk music, whatever. And then he got the wonderful, fantastic, sublime composer and arranger Vince Mendoza to score all these classic sort of songs from the Great American Songbook. And he held these concerts in different places, and I got to do one of them in San Francisco. And I remember standing on the side of the stage, and there were people like, Gwen Stefani and all these, and listening to all these beautiful, beautiful renditions in Vince's arrangements of these classic songs. And I remember thinking in that moment, I was aware of his work before with Joni Mitchell, but I remember thinking in that moment, if I was ever lucky enough to be able to do an album where I could take my, handpick some songs and have them arranged for an orchestra, Vince Mendoza would be the guy that I would want to do that. He has such an ability to excavate into a song and come up with these gorgeous, gorgeous orchestral arrangements that take it, completely transform it and take it to a different place. And to me, that's the thing. It's like it's an excavation in a way. I mean, I think there's a lot of, I think we could probably come up with a few examples of artists who have made records of their existing songs with orchestras, and it's as if simply it's as if they sort of inserted a song into sort of a somewhat generic string arrangement, and that's what you get. This project and the projects that he's been involved with is really taking it far beyond that. So anyway, so that was this sort of wish that I had in my back pocket for many, many years. And then fast forward to when I started working with my current manager, Chris Tetzelli, many years ago when we first met. And he said, tell me, what projects have you dreamt of in your life that you'd like to do? And I thought that was a great question as a way to get to know someone. And the first thing I said to him was, I started explaining an orchestral record with Vince Mendoza at the helm. And he said, oh, let's see if we can put that together. And that was the first project he and I did together. And the beauty of it was I enlisted my dear friend and beloved producer, Matt Rawlings, who I think you probably know. Wonderful.
I did a Christmas song.
He's
the best. He's
out of sight. And one of the greatest engineers of all time, Chuck Ainley. And then we went over to Air Studios in London and worked there and did this project. And in my mind, the reason I call it Songs from the Movie is that I'm a fan of soundtracks and sweeping choral music and landscapes of your mind that come to you when you are moved by a piece of classical music. And I just sort of felt like I just wanted to pretend for a moment, if you will, that this was a soundtrack to a movie, that all of these songs, knit together and fit together and sort of take the listener on a journey somehow. And in your own mind, you can create the movie. But that's why I called it that. And they were existing songs. And I really do feel that Vince took them to an entirely different place. And I love it. And then being able to tour when that record came out, that was a new experience for me. And at first I was terrified and I didn't, it's so different. And then I started thinking about it as, it's like learning to surf. And I don't know how to surf, but based on what I've heard people say, it's like you don't want to get too far forward on the board and you don't want to hang back too far either. Either way, you're going to wipe out. So it's like you're constantly recalibrating your position on the board. And that is how I learned how to sing live with an orchestra, because they're following Vince, but they're also following me. And I need to know when to lean in, to sing harder, to sing softer. And it was like that also in the recording studio. And I was in my own isolation booth, of course, and I would hear this swell of, passages between, cues to sing. And we had cameras on one another, so we could, I could see Vince conducting, he could see me. But I know this sounds silly perhaps, but I would hear like a passage of music and it would start to make me sob. It has a way of going way deep, Brandy. And
I don't know what that is, but it does.
It really does. And I would start like sobbing in the ISO booth, but I didn't want anybody to see. So I'd like duck. I'd get away from the camera and sort of, and then it was time for my entrance and I'd be there to sing, but it was quite an adventure doing that record, but I loved it and I love it still. And I'm so honored that you discovered it. Thank you.
Oh, and what's crazy about my discovery of it, I didn't know, is that part of Malibu and Calabasas that I was driving through, you mentioned Don Henley saving Walden Pond. I think he owns that land and owns it so that it can't be developed.
Right. That's, well, he's very much a conservationist, so I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. And
It's crazy that he had a big part of that record even happening.
it's all connected, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's a stunning record. And so anybody that's listening that doesn't have it, get it. Because I mean, there were songs on there that I've always loved, like I'm a Town.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what it was when it started. Where I was just like, oh, I wonder what this is. Because I just hit play. And it's not what it's the opposite of what you're talking about with this just generic strings on already existing songs, which can also move me. But it's a whole new thing.
Whole different thing. Yeah. That's right.
So I always love to ask everybody on here, and you can play the song or just talk about it. What was a song when you were growing up that made you want to write songs?
Oh my gosh.
Or a couple.
Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Well, it's like, it's hard for me to think of a certain song specifically, but it's like there's certain artists that captured my heart and my head and my soul, because I think that's what music does. Randy Newman as a lyricist, certainly as a player as well, as an arranger, everything that Randy Newman has done and does. There's, I can go back to like Woody Guthrie, Dust Bowl ballads. My parents had tons of records, and we always had music in the house. And so I just grew up listening to everything. But I will say that, as a teenager, I always just loved the Beatles. I loved Joni Mitchell. I loved, and I say loved in past tense, but this is present tense as well. People who, I think I was particularly drawn to artists, men and women, who also played music. They weren't just interpreters, which I suppose sounds like I'm walling it off from certain people, but I don't mean to. It's just that, when someone is not only, the writer or the not only the singer, the purveyor, if you will, of the song, but it came from their hand, and they're the ones who are presenting it to you. There's a skill, there's something to admire in that, and I always wanted to be a great player. I always wanted to, and that's one of the reasons why. Well, it's one of the reasons why I love your playing so much and your music, because I know what a great musician you are, and I'm full of admiration for that. And I just think that's a big part of why sometimes you're drawn to somebody.
I think about, I thank God all the time when I was in my formative years of music that there were artists like you on country radio, because that was where we got our music as kids. My mom kind of listened to everything, but when we were in the car, we lived out in the country in Washington State, and really the only station that came in was the country station. And so that was where we were going to discover. And then our town, when I remember there being a vote of cable TV subscription owners of, was it going to be CMT or VH1? We didn't get that vote. My parents got it. And I'm guessing they voted for CMT. But I always say, for me, that was such a fork in the road, because had it been VH1, my primary influences would have been way different, but it was CMT. Yeah. And so my brother and I would sit and watch CMT all night. I thank God for someone like you, because there were so many great female singers in my opinion, in the early to mid 90s that fell in, that country radio decided to embrace. Because I think of you as a singer-songwriter. I don't really think of you as necessarily, oh, she's a country artist. I feel lucky that you were embraced in those circles, because I discovered you because of that. But you were the one for me that really that played guitar and wrote her songs and was such a good. I mean, like I thought, oh wow, girls do that too,
Yeah.
because you just don't see it as much with women as you do with men.
Yep. Well, it's not even, it's sort of a conversation that doesn't even take place when you're talking about male artists, I think. But it's definitely a conversation when you're talking about female artists. But, I'm still kind of perplexed and bewildered. I don't know if we should wade into these waters, but, the whole thing about why women are not as represented as they should be on country radio nowadays. It's like, that's something that, it's not something that is on my radar all that much, but when I am aware of it, it's just the most perplexing and bewildering thing. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how that's possible, but
I don't know. I mean, I think it's one of those things that happens slowly over time, and we
yeah,
just wake up one day. And I mean, I do feel like, I mean, I don't pay attention to the charts. I never really have, but every once in a while, I'll look at the charts, and I do notice in the last little bit there are more females represented, which is great. But it's still
yeah,
not. It's still not, in my opinion, where it should be. And
right.
I just think I'm really thankful that the time when I was really diving in and figuring out music, that there were a lot of females,
Yeah,
and a lot of
yeah,
different kinds of females. Like it
yeah.
was, I don't know. I remember, not to embarrass you, but because here's, I was thinking back,
Uh-oh.
first time I remember hearing you, it was, let me see, I'll play just a little bit of it. You pretend and I pretend everything is fine. And though we should be out of here, it's so hard admitting when it's quitting time. I remember that.
I love that song.
And here's a funny story. My brother's 2 years younger than me. And I remember him and I sitting in the car and him telling me about some girl he had a crush on. And that song came on. And then and then I went through that period where you don't want to like your parents' music.
Right.
And then I remember going to a jam. My mom's always played music, a jam session party with my mom. And this woman sang Passionate Kisses. And
Oh,
I was like, man, I loved that. And the next day, my mom bought Come On, Come On, because
oh,
she always wanted us to share musical taste. Remember when she bought the Judds when I was really little? And so then I went back and learned and, found all your stuff prior to that and was like, oh, that was that Quitting Time song.
oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so,
So great. That
yeah.
is so great.
But yeah, I mean, thank God that country radio did play you, because I'm positive we were listening to country radio when we heard that song.
Well, I'll tell you, it's something that I'm tremendously grateful for, that I had that period of time in my life where I found a little niche to occupy, there. And I still don't know how it happened. And but I'm so grateful for all the people I got to play for as a result of it. And to this day, obviously, I'm a bit of a fatalist. I sort of feel like, what happens here leads to what happens over here and all of that. And so obviously if that hadn't happened, I'd be living a very different life. And you sort of said a similar thing a few minutes ago, if you had listened to VH1 instead of CMT. So, I can't be anything but grateful. It's an incredible thing.
Oh, well, I'm definitely grateful. Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't want to embarrass you. I don't want to embarrass you too much, but I mean, obviously you're a huge influence on me, but on a lot of people. I mean, I think anybody who's trying to write songs from a female perspective, not just from a female perspective, but I don't know why I need to put that in it, but just from a storyteller, real truth. I think that so much of that's going on today goes back to you.
Oh my gosh. Well, we all come from some place, and there's people before me who I feel like if it weren't for them, I wouldn't have, you know, become the writer or the artist that I am. And so, it's all a domino thing, is it not?
It is. So here's another question I like to ask people on here, and this is a tough one. Do you have a favorite song you've written?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm obviously, I can't, no, but I have, I don't know if you're like this, but they're definitely sort of episodic love affairs, if you will,
Yeah.
with certain songs. And you love them, they fill you up, they say what you need to say in that moment. You love playing them live. You are so thrilled that you wrote them, that they came from you somehow, whatever it is. And then you fall in love with something else. It's episodic. I don't know why that is. There, it's just call me fickle. I don't know.
I love it. What about an album? Like, because I was really, one time I was on the road with Dwight Yoakam and I asked him, do you have a favorite album? And he said, it's always the last one I did.
Well, I was just going to say that I finished. So when I saw you in London, I had literally the day before finished my album that I made with Ethan John's Real World in Southwest England, and I love that record so much. I'm so excited for when it comes out sometime soon. Process of trying to figure out when it comes out. It was good to come out earlier, or as things started to change in our lives, the release date for that changed as well. So it's still being discussed. But anyway, yes, I can't help it. I love that album more than I love any album right now, because it's new to me. It's fresh. I still feel the sense of work ethic and heavy lifting that went into it, that gives me deep satisfaction and happiness, and it's the most, because it's the newest album. And I believe you understand this as a writer who writes from what is internal in your life, and as well as observing the world outside of you. It's the most recent thing, so it sort of seems to be the most immediate, if you will, in terms of what it's saying about, for me, what I'm feeling, what I'm seeing, what I'm responding to, what makes me happy, what sinks me, what I wish for, what I long for. All of those things that are the things that make me want to write. All of those subjects, all of those motivations, if you will. It's the newest thing, and for me, even though I have been working on the writing for the last few years, it's the freshest thing, if you will. So it's my favorite album is the album that hasn't come out yet, but it's going to be out soon.
See, and what I love about that is you're multiple albums in, and you're still most excited about what's.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Brandy.
Oh, I just think that's inspiring. I mean, I've only made 3 records, and I'm always like, oh gosh, how do I make another one? And then I'll think like, okay, well that's done. Now I can start thinking about the next one. And so it's always exciting to me when I talk to somebody who's more than 3 or 4 albums in.
I was going to say, this is my 15th record.
See, that's amazing. And they've all been great. And that, not everyone can say that. I mean, that's the thing. And I love what you just said about, because I don't know if people that aren't songwriters understand this. When you said, you've been writing songs for it for a couple years. If you're a singer-songwriter, you're not going to put out a record every 9 months.
Oh my God, no. Although, I will tell you, back in the day, I think after I'd first had a few songs on the radio, there was a pressure from my label. You know, it was a different world back then, but there was definitely an expectation and pressure to follow it up very quickly, you know, with a new batch of songs, new album. And I remember having the conversation with my friends at the label, just saying, I have to live a life in order to write about it, you know, and not to sound like I'm a, you know, cannibal for my own existence, but that to me has always been the only well to draw from. It's your life, it's your feelings, it's all the things we've talked about. And so, you know, they would get pretty, you know, I don't want to say frustrated, but they had to learn a certain kind of patience with me that I was deeply grateful for, because it took, on average, I was releasing a record once every 3 years, and for an artist at that time, that was an eternity.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that time just being a fan, because you could count on most artists to have an album out every year. I can't even imagine that. But those artists were also cutting mostly outside songs, which
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Well, I'd love it if you wanted to play something. I mean, you don't have to play something that's on this new record, but if you wanted to, that'd be great. I don't know.
I'm it's sort of like your opinion. I mean, I could play something I think you would recognize, and I sure would. I don't know if it would be goofy, but if you felt like harmonizing,
well,
I would love that.
one thing you should know about me, I hate to admit this to you on here, I'm not a natural harmony singer. I just actually sang harmony on somebody's record, but they had to send me without the lead, so I had to learn it like that. And there's a weird delay on this, because I've had people try to sing harmony and it sounds like row, row, row your boat, but it sounds real weird. But
you got it. Well, so I did sing, I was singing along to you when you played a little bit of Quitting Time, so you might want to mute me on that one. So anyway, you know, I have something that I think is, shall we say, recognizable. And then I have a song that, it's a song that means a lot to me in terms of the times that we're in. It's a quiet song. And then I have a song that I think of as more of an anthem and speaks also to these times, but hopefully, you know, hopefully would lift us up. So you tell me what you feel like hearing.
I mean, I'd love to hear all three of those, as I'm sure everybody else would.
Well, I'd be happy to do it if you've got the time.
Let's do it. I'm sure at this point they're like, we want something. We want some music.
Well, how about, since I'm already tuned up for, let's see, I'll play the sort of quiet, more introspective one first. Okay. Get that out of the way. How's that?
I love that.
Now, forgive me. Here we go. My dog is at my feet. Oh, shoot. And it's like trying to move him is like trying to move a cement wall. Just like he decides where he wants to be, and then it's like, that's it. So it's like I'm trying to push back from him.
I've watched some of your streams. It's Angus, right? Is that Angus?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I get it. I have two. I have a poodle and a Maltese. And
well, they're not with you though, are they?
They are with me, yes.
Oh,
I get them out here, but one of them's 6 pounds and one of them's 10 pounds, and I can't move them, so I can't imagine a golden retriever.
85 pounds. He's a big fella. Okay. Can you hear that?
Yeah, it sounds really nice.
So this is a song, Brandy, called Hand on My Back. And it's on an album that I made about 5 years ago called The Things That We Are Made Of. And it came from a place where, you know, I'm going to try to explain it, but, you know, I think most people, as they grow older, as they live their life, the one thing we discover more and more as time goes by is we just want to feel seen. We just want to feel known, you know, by someone. And that And the way that happens isn't always just having a conversation with somebody. It's like you can meet someone and you just have this sense that they would be part of your tribe. You know, you just have an intuition about them, and they just make you feel known. They make you feel truly seen. And that sense of connection is like medicine, you know? And so in this time that we're in, where we have to stay apart from one another, it's very hard to the physical separation is hard enough, but also just we see each other through screens, and that can help to a point, but there's a sense of connection that is missing. And it's really hard, I think, to be going through that. And I think a lot of people are feeling that way. That said, you know, I think I've been saying a lot lately that patience is my superpower right now, you know, and I really do feel like that. And that's what I keep saying to myself when I'm having a hard time, feeling alone, feeling isolated, all that sort of thing. But at any rate, this was written obviously during different times, but I believe that we're going to get through this. And when we do, we'll be able to feel that sense of connection again. And this is a song about that. I move through the world like an arrow that flies, slicing the air as I'm mapping the skies. And way deep down, the echoes remain, memories sounding like rattling chains. But lately I think I'm coming around. I'm liking the feel of my feet on the ground. Last night I stopped dead in these tracks, recalling your hand on the small of my back. The slightest brush, but as powerful too as an electrical storm. It's moving on through, then it's gone as fast as it came, leaving nothing, not even the rain. When I was younger, how I took my time, folly and wisdom formed points on my mind. From one to another, with space in between, for the lessons you learn and the dreams that you dream. But tell me what happens when dreams don't come true, how you overcome some things until they overtake you. Why you never got chosen, why you never felt claimed by some passion or person that's never explained. I come on quiet, but I'm fierce as a lion. Life will take us apart, but we never stop trying to proceed as if whole and intact, like I felt with a hand on my back. Nothing can catch me when I'm moving fast. Even those rattling chains of the past. So I'll go like an arrow, but with nowhere to land. I am losing velocity, height, and command. We all hit the ground, we all fall from the sky. We burn up, we break up, we wreck and we cry. But we're bound up together by sight and by path. It begins with the touch of a hand on my back.
Oh, beautiful.
Thank you.
And so timely. You know, you think that is what we miss, is human touch. I mean, you're right.
Right.
A certain amount of connection you can have with this and the phone, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. It's not the same.
I know I was thinking, are we going to hug again? You know, because we're such a world of huggers.
Yeah.
You know,
I think we're going to be doing the elbow salute for a long time. I do. Until we have a vaccine, until everyone is safe, you know. But I believe those days will happen. Just maybe a little long. Patience is our superpower.
it's true. I'm gonna steal that. Patience is power.
I have two little mantras that I've been using during this time. One, the first one, stay mighty, actually came from a friend of our family's who was very sick. Her husband was very sick, and he's just recovering now, thank God. But she would send out, updates to everyone, and at the very end of each update, she'd say, "Stay mighty, stay mighty." So I kind of adopted that. It just speaks to everything. Good advice. So stay mighty is one of them, and the other is patience is my superpower.
And you know what I love about that song in your writing is as being someone who's studied it, is you're talking about somebody putting the hand on the small of your back. It's such an intimate and small thing. It turned it into a whole song because it's such a big deal. You know, I mean, that's where you really can see a tenderness with a couple, or
But that's what your songs to me are so brilliant. Why they're so, and to me, it's also why I love to write songs. I am presuming that this is one of the joys for you. There's something so, it's so to excavate the details, to speak to the little things, the details that might elude someone, but they don't elude, but you, for some reason, they've come into your brain, and that's what you're trying to speak to, or create a story from, or just details are everything, and that's what makes what hopefully we try to address so universal.
Oh,
Yeah.
that did that. Well, I have kept you a long time, but I would love it if you'd play one more song.
Oh, I'd love to. Well, I was going to, sort of default to something that's pretty, well known from back in the day, but I sort of feel like the song about that I sort of referred to as one that might kind of lift us up after this, the song I just played. This is the one that I sort of feel like playing, if that's okay.
Yes. And you know what? Everybody here on this is not interested in what is the most well I mean, this is like they're getting, I get lost in these where I forget that there are other people watching, and that's why they watch. And so, I mean, they didn't tune in for I Feel Lucky.
Okay, good.
They all love it, as do I. And I think every time I hear that, and because I love to gamble, and I'll think, man, Mary Chapin Carpenter and Don Schlitz, that was a smart. I mean, every casino in the world has to license this song, you know.
Oh, I wish.
Everybody here, myself included, we're here for the things that aren't on the front of a marquee, you know.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, I'll do this one then. Hold on a second. Okay, here we go. It's called Why Shouldn't We? We believe in things that we cannot see. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Hands that heal can set a chained man free. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? And we believe in peace within every heart. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Burning brightly, brightly in the dark. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? So come on, darling, feel your spirits rise. Come on, children, open up your eyes. God is all around. Buddha's at the gate. Allah hears your prayers. It's not too late. We believe in things that will give us hope. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Let your voice be heard. Celebrate your vote. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? So come on, darling, feel your spirits rise. Come on, children, open up your eyes. God is all around. Buddha's at the gate. Allah hears your prayers. It's not too late. We believe in things that make us all the same. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Love belongs to all in deed and name. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? And we believe in things that can't be done. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Lift up your heart, put down your gun. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Things we're told that we can't change. Why shouldn't we? We had heroes once, and we will again. Why shouldn't we? So come on, darling. Come on, children. God is all around. Buddha's at the gate. Allah hears our prayers. It's not too late. So come on, darling, feel your spirits rise. Come on, children, open up your eyes. God is all around. Who looks at the page? Mama hears you prayers. It's not too late. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't we?
I love that line about we believed in heroes. That's so great. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, I love talking with you.
I
What
love
a gas. Thank you so much for inviting me to.
Oh, you know what? If I could transport myself back to the back of my parents' Subaru when my brother and I were here in Quitting time, and You Never Had It So Good, I remember that really well too, and said, you know, someday you're gonna talk to her. Oh, for one thing, we didn't even have computers really yet. On a computer, I would have been blown away. So this was a real bucket list dream come true. I hope when this is all over, we can do it in person.
Well, you've got a deal, and when this is all over, we're going to give each other a really big hug. How's that?
Right. Thank you for making my day and a whole lot of other people's today.
It's a pleasure. Stay mighty, and don't forget that patience is our collective superpower.
Love it. Everybody out there, stay mighty, and patience is a superpower.
Right.
Don't go to the beach right now, or
stay home.
Don't do anything crazy.
Okay. Stay home, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brandy. We'll talk soon, okay?
Okay.